Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Glad you could all join us this morning for the UIC FAFSA Issues Update webinar. My name is Marty Gutierrez. I lead Government Relations and Advocacy at the University of Illinois, Chicago. My co-moderator is Nolan Drea. Nolan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nolan Drea. I'm the Associate Director of State Relations for the U of I system. I'm happy to be joining you today. And Marty, I'll kick it back to you.
Great. Well, the purpose of having this webinar is that we wanted to, our team at UIC wanted to share what the FAFSA crisis was, what the status is right now, what UIC has done to help applicants navigate the crisis, and what is the next step and what does the next year look like. We look forward to hearing from our leadership. We'll be introducing them shortly, and there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers and where to look for help at. So our first speaker is Keely Fletcher. Keely has over 20 years of experience in higher education administration and nearly a decade of experience as a financial aid and enrollment leader at UIC. In her current role, Ms. Fletcher oversees UIC's admissions and financial aid operations, which encompasses the offices of administrations, admissions, financial aid and scholarships, recruitment and strategic outreach, student systems, and the registrar's office. Thanks for being here, Keely.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and thank you all for attending on this very important topic to us at UIC. My colleague Rich Hayes will be going through in detail what happened this year for us at UIC, specifically with regard to the Better FAFSA rollout, and we'll be going into some more detail on how this specifically affects Illinois institutions. And then open the floor for any questions you might have. So with that said, thank you again very much for joining us today, and I'll pass it back over to Marty.
Nolan?
Sure. And I'll introduce Rich Hayes. So Rich Hayes is the Executive Director of Student Financial Aid and Scholarships at the U of I Chicago. He has over 15 years of experience in higher education and holds both an MBA and an MPA. Prior to coming to UIC, Rich was the Associate Vice Chancellor of Financial Aid and Scholarships at the City Colleges of Chicago, where he was also an adjunct professor of business. Rich has also served as Diversity and Professional Conduct Chairperson at the Illinois Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. Throughout his time in higher ed, Rich is focused on improving access to education for low-income and disadvantaged students and families. With that, I'll turn it over to Rich.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me today. Thank you so much for having me. So today we're going to jump right into it. We don't want to belabor this thing. We're going to talk about what we call the Better FAFSA disaster. That's the new term that we're coining here. And so once we finish up the presentation, then we'll open it up for questions from anybody on the webinar. So first, let's talk about the why. Okay. So back in 2020. The government wanted to pass the Consolidated Appropriations Act and created what is called the FAFSA Simplification Act. Now, the whole purpose of this entire act was to give more access of financial aid, especially Pell Grant, to students. So they estimated an additional 930,000 students would be able to get Pell Grant. They also wanted to streamline this. The original FAFSA was 110 questions. That's more than a mortgage application, right? And so now it's 46 questions, but everyone may not have 46 questions. It's web dynamic. And then they want to increase security and tighten up some of the loopholes. So that was the purpose of this whole FAFSA simplification, was to make it simple and also to give more access to students, right? Now, we can all agree that didn't necessarily happen the way that we thought it would happen, right? And so first, let me show you what a typical FAFSA cycle looks like. It's a very simple cycle. October 1st, we normally get the FAFSA is open to students. They can go in, they can do the application. It takes 3 to 5 days to come over to us. By October 31st, that's only 30 days away, we're already loading, institutions are already loading that FAFSA result. We call it ICER. So you're going to hear some of these acronyms in here, but we'll explain it. But FAFSA result, we call it an ICER. We load it into our student information system. We do our testing on it to make sure that students can get their financial aid award notification on time. We set up our new year. And so that process to do that is a few months. It takes a few months to even get that done because we're testing to make sure that the information is correct. The last thing we want to do is to tell a student that they're getting something and then they're not getting it for whatever reason. If you've been in financial aid before, you know that students as well as constituents will hold you to the fire for the information that you give out. After that, we go ahead, we package students. Package is a fancy way of setting up their financial aid on their account. They get a financial aid notifications. Now, by March 1st, they can make an informed decision on where they want to go to school at based on the entire package. They would have gotten their merit award notifications. They would have gotten their scholarship notifications as well as their financial aid notifications. That didn't happen in this particular cycle. And then by June 1st, over here at UIC, our continuing students are packaged. So now we normally go through the same cycle every year. Students have a certain expectation of it. Parents have a certain expectation of it. High school partnerships have a certain expectation of it. And now students can make an informed decision. None of that happened. It went totally off the rails. And we had to scramble to be able to weather that storm in a sense. So let's talk about some of those broken promises and that broken system. All right, I'm gonna go through some dates of some very key dates that happened and how it affected us, the institution, but also how it affected the student and the parent. Okay, first thing, FAFSA opened up December 31st. Now that was New Year's Eve. I don't know if everybody saw it. I just don't know. People could have been out having a good time. But the minute it opened up, it was a ton of intermittent outages. Students couldn't get in it. Parents couldn't get in it. And so what that did, that means that we were inundated at the institution with phone calls like, hey, I can't get into the FAFSA. What is going on? There was no guidance out there of how to get into this. All they kept saying is that, hey, we're testing this. We're bringing it on a little at a time, but they didn't let the institution or the FA administrators know that information. And so we held on to hope because they said that, oh, you know what? You're going to be able to get your ICER documentation, your FAFSA results by the end of January. So we told everyone that, hey, January 30th, you're going to have your ICE result. They're going to be moving this. And so we were happy, right? Now, when it opened up, immediately we realized that we had a lot of issues with this new FAFSA form. So we clocked about 15 different issues federally, nationwide. The paper form was not available. That affected a lot of our students who have parents without Social Security numbers, right? So they couldn't get the FAFSA done. Also, they had came up with a new process for students who parents didn't have a Social Security number. So those are some of the things that we experienced, and that was just with it opening it up. It didn't even become fully available to around January 8th. That's when it became fully available where everybody can actually get into it without all the intermittent outages. So let's fast forward a little bit. Remember I said January 30th, we'll be able to get the ICE results? That didn't happen. That did not happen, right? So they missed the deadline, and then Ed announces that it will start transmitting the ICER results or FAFSA results to us by the first half of March. I don't know about you, but saying the first half of March doesn't give me any type of good feeling because I don't have an actual date. So we didn't know exactly when it was going to come. So we had to let students know, hey, first half of March. Now, remember when I told you in the regular FAFSA cycle, we would have normally got this 30 days after students started putting in their FAFSA application, and it takes us months to test. So now our testing window has shrunk very much so, and we have to be able to still be accurate, but very quick, because we cannot be wrong when we're giving out these financial aid notifications. So when they told us this, we knew that financial aid notifications would be delayed. So we had to be transparent with our students, our parents, and our partners. Students who rely heavily on financial aid now had to wait to determine what school they were going to go to. Students were forced to make uninformed decisions. Parents did not know how they were going to pay for college. So the very students that this was supposed to help, it did not, right? Students who made an error on the FAFSA, because students always make errors, right? They couldn't go in and make any corrections on the error. It could have been something as simple as clicking the wrong button or not putting in your parent information. So what we did at UIC was, one, we had to move our priority there. We was the first ones to do it. Our system testing, again, was shrunk. We had upwards of 2,000 emails per week, and that's not including the calls or the people who came into the office. And then our high school partners was also in the dark. So we got calls from them about, hey, what's going on? How are we going to fix this? How are we going to make students whole? What can we do to offer more flexibility? So now we're reactive and we're scrambling. That was broken promise number 2. Let's keep going, all right? March 12th, Ed announces that now it's going to begin sending out small batches of ICERs to institutions. We got 7. Our first batch was only 7. Now, traditionally, by this time, we would have gotten roughly around 30 to 35,000 ICERs. We got 7, right? March 22nd, 10 days later, they announced that, hey, we sent you out the batches, but there was some errors in calculating some of those SAIs. So some of those students that you got that information for is incorrect based off a calculation that we didn't include in the federal methodology. For us, that was 900 plus students that affected. So now, in addition to, we have to identify which one of these students had an affected ICER. We have to figure out how to help that student out. Again, financial aid notifications will be delayed because we didn't get enough ICERs to even test. Students and parents have doubt at this point about even getting an award letter. And then now students are scrambling for answers and options, right? Larger batches had errors of 40% that were affected by that error. And then we had to advise parents and students on how we're going to move forward when we had no information ourselves. So I think one of the biggest issues here is that students, constituents, parents come to us, the university, to get the answers. And we didn't even have the answers because we were also in the dark, right? Let's talk about some more broken promises. March 25th, students cannot make corrections until the first half of April. So that means that now that we've made it past the ICERs actually coming in, we're working on getting these award letters out. Students can't make any corrections. So any student that made an error on their FAFSA, they can't go in and make a correction like they normally would. We have to wait until April 15th for that information to come. So now students are at a standstill. Students will have an additional delay on receiving their financial aid award letter. Corrections didn't even open up until April 15th, and we had a whole nother thing with that. And so then to correct the ICERs did not come to the institution within the 1 to 3 days that they normally would. So normally when you complete a FAFSA, it takes 3 to 5 days to complete. If you do a correction, it takes about 1 to 3 days before that correction comes over to us. And there was about a 2-week lag on corrections coming in, right? So that was another broken promise. March 29th, another error happened. It just kept getting progressively worse, right? So in addition to the first error that happened within the federal methodology, it was a second error that happened on the tax data that impacted 20% of our applications. And we had to wait until April 4th to get information from Ed to state that, hey, we're going to reprocess these students, right? So again, financial aid notifications are delayed because we have another error. Students got notifications of additional delays and their eligibility could go up or down based on the reprocessed ICER. What that means is you may have a student who had a 0 SAI. The old term was EFC. SAI stands for Student Aid Index, EFC, Expected Family Contribution. It's the same thing, but they renamed the term. So students who may have had a low SAI, and the lower the SAI, the more financial aid you get, now is getting notification that, hey, that may be wrong, it may go up. And so now your eligibility of what you could get may be lower based on the new number, right? So now those reprocessed ICERs didn't even come in until April 17th. All reprocessed ICERs came in by April 29th. UIC had to, the Ed did give what is called a safe harbor, which we were extremely happy about. But it meant that you had to do a lot of legwork with the safe harbor. What the safe harbor was that we can use the original SAI to package the student and send out an award notification as long as we identify that student and made that determination. So we did. We took the hard road because we knew that it was going to help our students. And in taking that road, that means there was a lot of additional work for us to be able to track those students, which we are currently doing right now to make sure they can still get as much financial aid as they possibly could. Now, on the flip side of that, ISAC didn't necessarily honor that safe harbor. When we spoke to ISAC, they said, hey, the way ISAC works is they look at the most current transaction. So that means if it's reprocessed, it's going to be a new transaction that comes in, and they're going to use that instead of the one that was originally there. That meant that the student could not get any MAP grant, depending on what the SAI went up to. But we wanted to use the federal safe harbor, so ISAC stated that right now their system just was not configured to be able to do that, and they were going to keep doing it same as always. So that meant that students could get their Pell Grant, and we could use the safe harbor per the federal government, but they may not get MAP grant. So that was something that we're still trying to figure out. All right. So this thing had far-reaching complications for everybody across the board. April 30th, the department announced changes to our system to temporarily allow students who had parents without Social Security numbers to immediately access the FAFSA form and create a studentaid.gov account. So in short, before, if a parent did not have a Social Security number, then they have to go through a verification process with TransUnion. If they could not get through that process, or if they answer any of the questions wrong, then they had to do it either by phone or by paper and mail it in to get verified before they can actually create a FSA ID account or a studentaid.gov account to complete the FAFSA. So that held a ton of students who had parents without Social Security numbers or undocumented parents up from completing that FAFSA. So on April 30th, they said, okay, we're going to go ahead and let them complete that. The caveat to that was they still wasn't verified. So since they're still not verified, that means that they couldn't get a financial aid award notification because the SAI never came over. So until they finish that verification, that's the way it is right now. Until they finish that verification, we don't get an SAI to determine how much financial aid they can get. So we have students right now who are enrolled, who are waiting for their parents to try to get through that process. When we reached out to the federal government, they created a two-tier system. So if a parent submitted something that was a little blurry or it wasn't all clear, they go into tier 2, and they can be in that tier 2 for months. 4 months. And the only way to get out of it is to go back in and to resubmit the verification documentation to be able to go back into tier 1 and try to submit a clear ID or picture or form as opposed to waiting. So that's what we were informing our students to do. So we tagged all those students. We know exactly who they are, and we're monitoring those students. But again, that's an uphill battle. All right. Another broken promises. May 10th, ED announced they will begin processing paper FAFSAs. The reason students did paper FAFSAs is because they couldn't get through the verification process for their parents. So they said, hey, I'll do a paper FAFSA, I'll sign it, I'll call it a day. But they wasn't processing paper FAFSAs until May 10th. And then they said that students who did a paper FAFSA will not be able to submit corrections until the end of June. So again, this affects our student population who have undocumented parents. The paper FAFSA allows parents to bypass their verification process, but what they did was if a student did an online form and a paper form, they went with the online form. And then we received update on June 28th that they'll finally be able to make corrections on the paper FAFSA. So these delays are compounding and compounding, right? And this is one of the last ones. June 30th, ED announced to institutions that we cannot submit corrections to students' federal aid documents in bulk. So let me explain what that means. Normally, when a student needs to submit a correction, we can submit that correction within our system. We send it over at night up through a system through called FAA Access, and then we can bulk correct all these student files. Now we have to go into what is called the FSA Partner Portal, and we have to do it manually, student by student. And that takes a very long time to get corrections done, especially when the student is trying to get their financial aid in. They're trying to avoid any type of late fees. They're trying to get their refund so they can get books and anything associated with cost of attendance. And so that's a delay for any student that was selected for verification or have to submit documentation. That now we have to do these corrections student by student within the ed system. They still haven't given us a timeline when that's going to be up. We're still waiting. So when you add all this up and you add up this stew of stuff, this is how we weathered the storm. One, we was the first to move our priority deadline. We said students need more time. We moved it back to June 1st. We had to change up our packaging protocol for one of our biggest institutional funds, which is UIC Opportunity Grant, to make sure students who had it in the prior year can still get it for this year. So we gave them a 1-year grace period to be able to get that UIC Opportunity Grant, even if they was not eligible. All right. So we want to make sure they were whole there. We held various financial aid workshops virtually, in person, to assist over 600 students. We held specific FA sessions at our Ignite and Midday prior to the rollout of the new packaging. We hosted our first financial aid symposium in which we had parents, students, high school partners come on campus, in which we talked about everything financial aid. We did a FAFSA troubleshooting workshop where we can actually sit down with them, go over their FAFSA, see what the holdup is, get them completed. We work with our state representatives, even coming out to their offices to work with their constituents, community organizations, various stakeholders as far as high school. And we also took advantage of any flexibility that the Department of Ed was going to put out there. We was going to take advantage. It didn't matter how much work it was going to be on us. We knew we was going to put the work in. We was going to have to get our hands dirty, but we wanted to make sure students were whole. And so that's what we did to weather the storm. And this is where we are now. There are still 15 open issues. They don't have fixes, they have workarounds, which means you have to find a way around that issue. 6 open issues with just FAFSA corrections. Again, these are workarounds, not fixes. So we think those fixes need to happen. All right. And I put the link there where you can go in and take a look at that. They announced that the FAFSA will be open on December 1st instead of October 1st for 25-26 with a fully functioning FAFSA. And so what they did do is they stated that they're going to do a phased rollout. We haven't got all the information on what that phased rollout would look like, but they did say on October 1st, they will open up the FAFSA for testing from institutions that can go in and test out this new FAFSA and poke at it for any holes or any issues that it may have. The other thing is ISAC still is going to operate as usual as far as the safe harbor, which we think that we should take advantage of the safe harbor, especially considering the multitude of errors committed by Department of Ed on this new FAFSA rollout. And so that's where we are now. And this is how our legislators can help us out. One, with urgency, we think a phone call or any type of alternate communication should go to the U.S. Department of Education. Just recently, the head of the Department of Education in Virginia sent a letter to Ed about some of the challenges they're having in the state of Virginia. For example, we know that nationwide, FAFSAs are down 11% year over year. I can tell you at UIC, that number is closer to 20% for just our students, because we deal with a high population of students who both have a low SAI, so they are needy students, and also a high population of students with parents without Social Security numbers. We have a ton of students who have rejects on their FAFSA with no code or no indication of why it's rejected. So now we have to go through that to figure out what that code is instead of them just giving it to us. So we think we need to shift our focus from creating fixes to handling these open issues. We also, they said they're going to solicit feedback. We're going to see how it happens. We hope that's the way it goes on October 1st. But also we have the gainful employment reporting that's going to be due. We really need to shift focus away from that and focus on this 25-26 FAFSA rollout. So some additional flexibility there would be most appreciated so we can focus on the FAFSA. Students with parents without Social Security numbers are still unable to get their offer letters due to this new verification system. It needs to be overhauled. We need a new system. We have to understand when to pivot and when things are just not working, right? And it's just not working and it's affecting our students. Talked about the rejects. Another thing we have is we have a lot of students who have a citizenship hold, and normally that process only takes about 30 days from the Department of Homeland Security. It's been taking 90 days or more. So students are sitting there. We go through a system called SAVE to verify if this student is good with their alien registration number. And these are for all of our non-citizens who have alien registration numbers. But that's another host. So this FAFSA has caused wide-ranging issues across the board. And then I think the last thing is, if we can get ISAC to take advantage of that safe harbor rule, I think that'll be most appreciated by any institution in the state of Illinois, because that means that students will be able to get that original amount of financial aid, as opposed to having to come back later and say, hey, you can't get it because Ed made an error on your FAFSA application. So I digress. That is us in a nutshell. And I'm gonna kick it back to Martha, so we can open it up for any questions that you may have. I think you're muted, Martha.
I sure was. Thank you, Rich. That was fantastic information you shared. I myself learned a lot. Wanted to give you and Keely a few minutes to answer, to wrap up this FAFSA presentation before we go into the Q&A, if there's anything else you wanted to share, so I'll leave it to you. And Keely, if you have any other points that you wanted to share.
Thank you, Marty. I just a few points just from an overall enrollment perspective with how this relates to enrollment numbers or students enrolling in higher education in the state of Illinois. As many of us know, this crisis affected different students differently, if that makes sense. So while this crisis affected all institutions of higher education that are Title IV approved in Illinois and in the US, it did not affect all institutions in the same way. In particular, students who are low income and first generation were primarily affected by this crisis, where students who don't fit into those particular categories might not have felt the same effects of not being able to file a FAFSA. Just anecdotally, some students who don't rely on financial aid to make a decision to go to college, they're not going to be affected by a delay in their FAFSA being processed. Where a first generation student who's from low income background, those students relied primarily on financial aid to make enrollment decisions. And so while all institutions were definitely affected by the FAFSA crisis, by far students, schools that look like ours, minority serving institutions, Hispanic serving institutions, institutions with Pell percentages of more than 50%, very much like us at UIC, were affected acutely by the FAFSA crisis. So with that in mind, as we go into our fall 24 enrollment cycle, which was the first cycle that was really affected by the FAFSA crisis, we are seeing a decline in enrollment from those categories of students, in particular, Latino students and first generation students when it comes to our decline enrollment for us at UIC. Now, we won't know for certain until our census occurs, which is after the 10th day. Our classes just started on Monday, but we do know already in terms of who did we yield at UIC, who indicated that we want to come to UIC, those numbers were down specifically in those categories, Latino students and first generation students, as well as low income students. And we believe it was primarily based upon the FAFSA crisis. And other institutions who do not enroll students primarily from those populations like we do will not see the same enrollment declines that schools that look like us will. So that's just to kind of give you an indication as to how this particular crisis relates to students enrolling in universities at Illinois. It is different depending on the university the student is enrolling to, is choosing to enroll in, primarily based on whether or not they have that need for financial aid, or if they can overcome those challenges financially and make an enrollment decision.
Rich, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would like to add is, excuse me, is that as we get ready to go through this FAFSA cycle and then we get ready to start a new one, we really need to focus on fixing what we already have broken before we jump into a new FAFSA cycle, because otherwise it's just going to compound the issues, and we're going to have two cycles we have to work through now that have issues as opposed to one. So that is my biggest concern, is that I really want this 25-26 FAFSA to not have any issues. We did submit comments to the RFI that they put out there about ways they can change it, update the questions. We're doing everything we can on our part. And then even with our Vice Chancellor, Kelly Fletcher, she has been the guru with contingency planning, right? Making sure that we have backup plans in place to help our students. So we're going to do what we need to do to make sure students are serviced, but we really need some help from the legislators to make some noise, in a sense, to get these things fixed.
Great, thank you so much. Representative Lilly would like to know if we could share a glossary of terms, financial aid terms. And I believe you have something prepared, Keely.
Yes.
We do. Yeah, we do have a glossary of terms as well as some definitions as well. One thing my background before coming into enrollment management was in financial aid. I actually sat in Rich's chair at UIC before assuming my current position, is we love our acronyms and we tend to speak inside baseball real well amongst each other. So apologies for not having those available at the start, but we absolutely can share acronym breakdowns and definitions for everyone.
Wonderful. And Senator Hunter wanted to know if we could share the slides that Rich presented.
Absolutely. Be very happy to share that with you.
Great. So all the participants, we have your email information. We will forward those to you as quickly as possible. Thank you. Nolan?
Sure. We had another good question from Representative Lilly asking, can we share the breakdown on the demographics of the student impacts by this FAFSA disaster?
At this point, we still don't have that in hand. We're still waiting for our 10th day of census numbers to come in. So it's still a moving target, if that helps. But once we meet that 10th day number, which is in early September, that's when our class is really kind of set. And that's when we'll be able to provide some more concrete demographic information in terms of how the FAFSA crisis affected the class, the incoming class of UIC. Some numbers that we know already, we do know numbers break down in terms of how many students we yielded at UIC, but we don't really know the throughput through enrollment until that 10th day number. So after that 10th day, we'll be able to share some high level demographic information on our enrollment at UIC.
Thank you, Keely. Nolan, do you want to?
Sure. It looks like we had another question come in online before this started. Where should students go to check their FAFSA status if they're not sure yet?
I would say the best place they can go is one, they can go into their to studentaid.gov. They'll need an FSA ID. That's the first place I will go to check to see what their status is. If they can't find anything there, they need to go into their financial aid office and talk to the financial aid administrator or the financial aid advisors who can definitely help them. Now, the schools I'm talking about is the schools that they put on their FAFSA application. So any school that they put on their FAFSA application or a school that they'll be attending, they want to go in there and we can go in and check to see what the status of that FAFSA is, if it's hold up, if it's sitting in suspense somewhere or you know, wherever it's sitting. So that will probably be the best bet is to go into that financial aid office.
Great.
Thanks, Rick.
We welcome any questions you may have. We're here to, our team's here to support and answer any questions.
Looks like we had one additional question. Oh, a few additional questions now. What can we do to help?
Within our presentation, we had, I have a slide that shows all the different ways we can help, but we need to make noise. That's really what we need to do about some of these fixes that need to actually have fixes and not workarounds or patches or band-aids in a sense. And so we'll share that slide out. I think I can share my screen and I'll show you let me share my screen really quick while we're on here. All right. And Nolan, can we see that? Can we see that screen?
Yep.
Okay, so I want to go back. So right here, go back. This is how you can help. So we said with urgency, a phone call or some type of communication to the U.S. Department of Education about the following. One, shift our focus away from creating fixes and band-aids to actually fixing the issues that we have. If you even Google FAFSA 2425 issues, it will show you all the different issues that's open right now. We have 15 that's open, another 6 that's open on just FAFSA corrections. We know that October 1st, they're going to solicit feedback from institutions to be able to go in and test the new 25-26 FAFSA. So we're waiting on that information. We did submit comments from UIC to that RFI that they sent out, which was a request for information on how they can make the form better. Also, I know a big thing that a lot of institutions are dealing with is gainful employment reporting that is due in October. And that's a big lift for a lot of institutions because we're reporting on a lot of different programs and a lot of students. And so if we can shift focus or get some type of extension or flexibility on that gainful employment, we can focus more on the pressing issue, and that is the 24-25 FAFSA cycle that we're currently in right now, as well as the upcoming 25-26. We know that parents who are undocumented still are having a hard time getting their verification done. We think that the system is just not working. They have to go through TransUnion. A lot of them never put anything inside of TransUnion. They don't even know what TransUnion is. And so they are able to complete the FAFSA, but the SAI is not calculated. It doesn't come over to us. as a number, so we still can't give them a financial aid notification. So we have a number of students who are enrolled and they have no award letter because the parents still have not completed that verification yet. And Department of Ed created a two-tier system, which if a parent falls into the two-tier system because they submitted documentation that was not easily readable, then they're sitting in there for 30 days, 60 days. They don't even know how long they're sitting there. It's for a very long time, and they have to go back in and resubmit. Another thing is we get a lot, and those create rejected FAFSAs. They come over to us, and they don't give us a reason code why they're rejected. They're just kind of sitting in limbo, and then we have to go and research. Last I checked, we had about 500 FAFSA rejects, and these were people who did not have an actual code to tell us why I was rejected. So we're working through that process right now. So a lot of these issues that's caused by this 24-25 FAFSA has put a strain on the office, and we have to kind of chase the rabbit in a sense to make sure students are taken care of. And I think one immediate thing that we can do is talk to ISAC about adopting that safe harbor option that Department of Ed gave out when it incorrectly calculated students' SAIs based on tax information that they put in, and also calculations with the federal methodology. We want to make sure students can get all the aid and flexibility that they can, because it's not their fault. It is not their fault that this is happening, and we want to make sure that they have all the flexibility. So this will be shared. Martha will share this out, but this is how our legislators can help us out.
And I just want to add one more quick thing, because it kind of came out later in the game before we were this came out after we put this together. Rich mentioned ISAC, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. We received word last week that they were suspending MAP awards as of August 21st. So what that means is a student to receive a MAP award for the 24-25 academic year would have had to had a FAFSA filed by August 21st. That's a month earlier than it has been in years past. And in fact, 2 years ago, there wasn't a deadline at all with regard to application deadlines for MAP awards. To say this year would not be the ideal year to go early when it comes to suspending awards would be an understatement. We know a number of students who have not had the ability to file a FAFSA yet due to the many reasons, the plethora of reasons that Rich has identified. And so suspending the MAP awards for students earlier this year than it has been in years past will continue to create a challenge for us. We know at UIC, just based on our current information, there are about 400 students who will be potentially affected by that, to the loss of $4 million. So that is a significant loss. And that's just our institution because of the application suspension, which took place on the 21st of August. So that's another area where we could use your assistance with the ISAC in terms of assisting with opening that suspension deadline as soon as they can, and allowing students who have not yet been able to file a FAFSA to still receive the MAP award if they have been unable to, the plethora of reasons that we've documented here today. So that's one more area of concern that literally just happened last week, right before we completed this presentation for today. So I apologize that it's not on this slide.
Wow, that's not good news.
I hate to put it this way, it was deflating when we received that notification. It was deflating.
Wow. Our students really need all of your support. We have a question from Ms. Hernandez in Congressman Garcia's office to clarify. Students with parents without Social Security numbers have yet to receive a financial aid award letter. Is that correct?
So clarification, if the parent has not completed the verification process, that student has not gotten a financial aid award letter because their SAI is blank. So for any parent who is undocumented, don't have a Social Security number that completed that verification process, those students do have an award letter. Their SAI came through, we packaged that student, they have an award letter, but we have a number of students whose parents are still going through that verification process. And until they complete that process, we don't get an SAI to be able to give them a financial aid award letter.
Thank you.
So we have another question that came in. For enrolled students, specifically first-generation low-income students who still need verification and don't have the funds to be able to afford paying for college, how are they being funded in the meantime? Example, how are they paying tuition for residence halls, food, etc.?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, for those students right now, they aren't, and that's part of the problem. Specifically at UIC, we have somewhere in the ballpark of 75 to 80% of our total student population rely on some form of financial aid in order for them to pay their college costs. And while we are waiting for their FAFSA to arrive so that we can prepare a financial aid notification for these students, they are in limbo. One thing about UIC, though, we are what's called a post-enrollment billing school, which means that students have until September 28th at UIC to pay their tuition and fees. We do not drop students from courses if they do not pay. We do not remove them from residence halls if they do not pay. So that is not something that we do. So students do have a little bit of latitude in terms of timing to resolve their financial aid prior to that September 28th payment deadline. And after that, that's when late fees will begin to accrue. What will happen, they will not be able to register for their spring semester if they do have outstanding direct costs to us. So we do have a little bit of time to assist students with resolving the FAFSA issues before their bill will be due. But at this point, we have students who rely on financial aid for living expenses and books and other types of supplies that are in limbo while we're waiting for their FAFSA details to arrive so that we can prepare a financial aid notification for them. So it's a high concern for us students who are in that category to ensure we resolve any of these issues quickly. But as Rich has displayed here today, many of these issues are beyond our control.
Thanks, Keely.
Glad to add.
Go ahead, Marty. Sorry.
Any more questions? Okay. Well, we thank you for your questions. We hope this webinar was helpful to you. We look forward to following up with you with the background information that we discussed, the acronyms, the glossary of acronyms, the PowerPoint presentation, and a fact sheet that the enrollment office has put together. We thank you so much for joining us today. And we will also share contact information, particularly for UIC, that you can share with your constituents to follow up with us. And we'll follow up with also with some information just on some talking points, how you can support us with the Federal Department of Education and ISAC. So because your support is greatly appreciated. Our students need all the financial aid that they can get in order to get their education done. So we thank you. We thank all the speakers, and we thank all the elected officials and their offices who joined us today. Thank you.